Good day and welcome to another episode of Cult Life with me, your host, Robin Jackson. Glad you could join me this week. Just a quick thank you to all of those who've been interacting with me on YouTube and on the different platforms with this podcast. Loving your comments, loving your your interaction. So keep it up, and thanks for that. I really enjoy the encouragement as well from a lot of you, from a lot of the listeners. I have Ryan Hogarth joining me tonight on the show. Ryan is a former Scientologist, and Ryan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me, and appreciate you taking the time out to join me.
Yeah, Robin, thank you very much.
Yeah, just a bit of background, Ryan. I'm just gonna give the viewers a bit of history. I think you and I met quite a few years ago on a television program. I don't know if you can recall that.
That's correct. Yeah. No, I remember it very, very well.
Yeah. I had just come out of the Jehovah's Witnesses at the time, and I wrote both books at the time, and I think we ended up on the show. The show was about cults and my journey through the Jehovah's Witnesses, and you were with Scientology still.
Yes.
At the time, yeah. Spokesperson for Scientology?
Yeah, that's right. So it was a little bit awkward because you were talking about the Jehovah's Witnesses and the cult you had left, and then you were saying, well, Scientology is a cult, and I was going, no, it isn't. And so that was pretty much to sum up our interaction, that was it.
Yeah. And let me tell you, I still have the, you gave me a DVD that evening, about Scientology, which I ended up watching, by
goodness.
the way. Which is very interesting.
And it didn't make you a Scientologist instantly. I'm terribly disappointed.
Yeah, no, good. But it's good for you to join. Thanks for joining me. Let's get into
Sure.
it. How did you get into Scientology? Let's talk about your background in there.
Well, I was a bit of a rarity in Scientology in that I was a third generation Scientologist, sort of. I mean, my grandmother got involved in the early mid 60s in Rhodesia, and my father and his brother were young teenagers at the time, so they got involved. And then my dad met my mom in Scientology, and so I pretty much grew up with it. It was I didn't really know anything else spiritually, religiously, or worldview wise. Scientology was my understanding of the world. Yeah. So and then in my early teens, when I was about 13, we moved to my parents moved to Los Angeles to be with the church full time there. So at the age of 13 in 1985, I found myself in Hollywood, California, and I was very excited to be there because it wasn't a great time to be a South African, certainly a white South African back in those days. It was troubled times. So it was great for me to get out of the country, and then very quickly I got pretty much full-time involved with the church and sort of signed up for the billion-year contract. And my parents' planned immigration didn't work out, so we actually landed up moving back to South Africa just a few months later. But by then I was involved, and I said to my mom, well, I don't want to go back to school. I'd much rather just do this full-time, and that's what I did. So from the age of 13, that was my life, pretty much 14, 16 hours a day, devoted to saving the world with Scientology.
Yeah. And you know what, you speak about, from the age of 13, it resonates with me because with the Jehovah's Witnesses, I got baptized officially at the age of 13, and
wow.
When you get baptized with the Jehovah's Witnesses, you decide to dedicate your life to Jehovah God, so to speak. So,
wow.
Yeah, that 13 years old teenager didn't know any better, and we were indoctrinated with I suppose, our relative dogma and
yes,
at the time. So, yeah, I can really relate to that.
And it's incredibly powerful because, I mean, in the Scientology doctrine, young people, children, are viewed as pretty much as adults in small bodies. So you're sort of given the responsibilities of an adult and the expectations of an adult. So as this young person committing myself, there was so much sort of validation for what I was doing. People like, "Oh, Ryan, you're amazing and you're great," and it just feeds in, and the more that happens, the more committed you become. So it was, and it's a very interesting thing. And only in later years do you look back and go, "Oh my goodness, 13 years old, I missed. I mean, there's a lot of trouble I didn't get into, and I suppose in a way I can be grateful for that. But there was a lot of experience and fun and living that I didn't do as a teenager."
Absolutely, yeah. I fully resonate with that. It really, really, your journey's been so similar.
How old are you now, Robin?
I am, should I give this away? 48, Ryan.
Okay, so we're very similar. I'm 46. So from an age point of view, so that TV show we were on was probably 10 years ago.
Yes. Was it 10 years ago already? Wow. Jeez.
Well, listen, I've been away from the whole Scientology thing close to 8 years now.
Yeah.
Well, my journey out started 8 years ago, and so it was at least 2 years before that we were doing it. That we did that show.
Wow, time has flown. But what I've always wanted to ask, the recruitment techniques that the church uses. I often see a lot of the people in shopping malls with the Dianetics books and the e-meters.
Yes.
Is that one of the recruitment techniques that the church uses?
Yeah, it was a big one probably, 12, 13 years ago. And it used to get done around the world, where we would invade any shopping center that would have us. And we'd have the e-meter there and the books. So the selling of the books has always been viewed as the sort of frontline method of recruitment or proselytizing, getting people in and that sort of thing. So, but honestly, Robin, and that's been the method for as long as I was involved, the idea of going out and selling books. But the problem, starting in the mid-2000s is, or certainly once there were smartphones, is, someone sits there and talks to you and they haven't got 10 feet away and they're Googling, well, what is Dianetics? What is Scientology? So they became less effective because people had so much more access to information. So they weren't being roped in before they found out the other side of the story. They were kind of getting that info very early on.
Yes. And that is so true with the Jehovah's Witnesses as well. I think, and I read a statistic sometime today about the dwindling numbers and how with the Jehovah's Witnesses the numbers are certainly dwindling, the membership.
Wow.
And I suppose it's with Scientology as well. I think because of the age of the internet, and it's been a thorn in the side of many of these groups, because as you say, it's access at your fingertips. The other side of the story comes out.
Well, I think the Jehovah's are certainly more visible to me than the Scientologists. I mean, I still see Jehovah's Witnesses in the neighborhood and they're walking around, and I've had a few notes pinned to my door and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
All the shopping malls I've been to, I haven't run into any Scientologists recently. So I think the Scientology numbers are probably a little smaller than the Jehovah's.
Yeah, yeah, it seems like it. Just going back to the television show that you and I were on,
Yes.
after that show, Udi, the host of the show, he related an experience to me about one of his friends. Now, I know Narconon, which is Narcotics Anonymous,
Yes.
is an arm of Scientology,
Right.
And is that a recruitment tactic as well? Is that the other side of the coin? Or?
Yes and no. It's a bit of a tricky thing because the Scientology community are very opposed to drugs, which on its face is a good thing, but it sort of extends to a lot of medicinal drugs, not sort of complete Christian Scientist sort of rejection of it, but it's frowned upon, and certainly commercial drugs. So the people in Narconon, I guess it was more of a PR tool than a recruitment tool.
Okay.
Because we didn't really want to be recruiting all these ex-drug addicts who have their own issues and problems, and so we didn't want to like deal with their issues.
Yeah.
But certainly it looked good for us that we were taking a strong interest in and action against drug addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And whether the methods of Narconon are scientifically valid or not, well, I mean, many say they aren't. I mean, it was using the sort of Hubbard method to get people off their addiction, and whether that's correct or not, I'm not entirely sure. Probably not. I don't know. Mm-hmm. So it was more of, if that makes sense, it was good for PR rather than active recruitment of members.
Yeah.
Having said that, certainly a few people through Narconon became Scientologists.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I've heard that a lot. So yeah, that's why I asked you that question.
Yes.
Was your waking up, in inverted commas, a gradual process, or was it was there some pivotal event for you in terms of your journey out of Scientology?
Well, having, it's obviously a topic I've become quite fascinated with, people leaving their, whether it's Christianity, Jehovah, Scientology, whatever. Yeah. And I think my story probably mirrors many, is that it was very gradual and then all of a sudden. So, I mean, it was sort of gradual in a way that I wasn't even aware that it was happening. But I was becoming increasingly unhappy and dissatisfied and concerned about what was going on. And then there was absolutely a pivotal moment, a sort of moment of truth, if you like. And It was quite simple, is that, there were two very, very senior Scientologists who I knew personally, but they had also been bosses of mine, very, very senior bosses. I hadn't interacted with them a lot, but to me they were gods. They were so high up in Scientology. They were gods to me. Mm-hmm. And I happened to read an American newspaper article where both of these people were quoted and exposing abuses within the church. And that was such a massive shock to the system, because I didn't even know they were no longer Scientologists. Yeah. I didn't know they were no longer part of the church. And here I am reading about them, and the things they were saying rang true to me. It wasn't like, I'd read lots of articles where people said Scientology's this or that and it's bad and it's a cult. Yeah. But I didn't know them. And what they said didn't quite ring true to me. But these were people I knew, I respected, and there was a ring of truth of what was going on at the very senior levels of Scientology. And that was the oh my God moment, and the decision that, okay, I'm going to need to leave. Yeah. And then it took years. I mean, from there, it wasn't like I stood up and said, okay, everybody, I'm out, and I walked out the door. It still took another probably 3 years for, eventually I was excommunicated, but it was 3 or 4 years after that point when I was sort of fully done with it all.
Yeah. You say, and I can relate, because for me it was a gradual, and for many it's a gradual process. And I can relate from the age of 13, growing up in the Jehovah's Witnesses. There were these little alarm bells that were going off, as I grew up. And of course you taught to suppress the alarm bells or the doubts. And then, as you say, there is that pivotal moment where you step back and you say, no, listen, I've got to do something. Yeah, I've got to check this out. I've got to do some more investigation. So I think for most it's a gradual process.
And it's a very emotionally traumatic experience, and I don't know how your experience was, but I went through a period of probably a year of trying to figure out what are my thoughts and what are Scientology's thoughts. It was so hard for me to separate myself from it all, Yeah. And I, in every situation, I'd look at people and I'd react in a way, and I'd go, is this a Scientology response, or is this actually me? And it was very, very hard.
Yeah. No, that's true, because the whole cognitive dissonance effect comes into play, and it plays on the psyche and it plays on the mind, and it's difficult, for people to get out of it. You mentioned that, of course, eventually you were excommunicated, and like a lot of us, get disfellowshipped, and of course, you've lost
family, friends.
Correct. Look, I mean, my whole family on my side of the family was involved. My mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, my aunt, my uncle, my grandmother had passed by that time. The sort of relationship with them and all the friends I had sort of ceased very dramatically overnight, over a period of probably 5 days in November 2013. But very fortunately, my wife and I left together. And at that time, my son was about 16, 17, 18, and he came with us. So we had each other, which was incredibly important. So yes, we sort of lost those friends and that network, but we kind of had each other to see each other through it, which was enormously helpful.
Oh, absolutely. That's sure. Looking back in my experience, I left first, and then my wife gradually afterwards. So there was that bit of a tussle in between, my leaving and her leaving. So but as you say, lost friends and family, instantly cut off from your community, and so on. So and we all know that Leah Remini's Scientology: The Aftermath.
Yes,
Going clear has made a lot of it's caused quite a stir.
Yes.
Have you watched Going Clear and Leah Remini's series?
I've watched Going Clear, and I watched the first season of The Aftermath. And in fact, her co-host Mike Rinder, who does the show with her, that's one of the two people I was talking about that had left the church. That was my big aha moment. And I've definitely watched the series. As I said, I watched season 1, and it was interesting to watch because a number of the people I knew, and it was interesting to see their stories. And it's always such a weird thing, Robin, because you're having a show which is, say, 40 minutes long, and you're condensing what in some cases is a 30-year story into 40 minutes, which out of necessity does, I guess, sensationalize it a little bit. So someone who's never been involved, and I'm sure you've had these conversations, someone who's never been involved watches it, and then they look at me and they go, how could you have been involved with that? And it's so, and you say, you can't understand, yes, those terrible things happened, but they happened in between a lot of very boring, ordinary stuff.
Absolutely.
Where life just carried on and you did your thing, and so it's so I struggle with. They go, Ryan, you're intelligent. How come you did that? Well, this is social conditioning is a very powerful long-term thing. It's not like, hey, Ryan, this is you today. We want you to believe all these things and do it all tomorrow. It's this happens over years.
Yeah. And you talk like that, which brings me to my next point. Those type of documentaries highlight the abuses, as you say, in 40 to 60 minutes.
Yes.
But it's the same with Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, there's been a lot of abuses that has come out now in terms of child sexual abuse that's been happening and been covered up. The rank and file. We, like you and I and the other people that were in the group, as you say, in between, our lives were, just going along, listening to the dogma, going out and doing the recruitment. And a lot of the abuse was covered up and doesn't get to reach the rank and file.
Yes.
And it's only afterwards that, when you get out and you see how deep the rabbit hole actually goes. In terms of these things. That's so true. Interesting you mentioned Mike Rinder. I actually watched an interview with Mike the other night with Lloyd Evans, who's another ex-Jehovah's Witness activist at the moment. And they paralleled as well, the similarities in terms of Scientology and the Jehovah's Witnesses. And how the control mechanisms are so similar. The disconnection mechanism, the old disfellowshipping and the shunning, the loss of family. It's so similar, and I think that's why. And he mentioned that
on the show, Scientology, The Aftermath, the response from viewers, they are getting a lot of responses from the Jehovah's Witness community, ex-Jehovah's Witness community.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it's so similar in
wow.
in terms of the whole shunning, disconnection, and the control mechanisms.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you now, Ryan, connect with former members in South Africa? Are there a lot of former members yeah?
There are a number that I sort of have casual relationships with. When I first left, and when I was first excommunicated, disfellowship, disconnected, yeah. I guess I played the role of an activist probably for about a year. And because of that, I had a lot of current and some former members getting in touch and sharing their stories, and people who are still in and struggling, and sort of helping them with that and giving them advice and being a support person for those sorts of people. Yeah. But probably over the last 3-4 years, that has dwindled, because I eventually arrived at a point where it was time for me to focus on building a life outside of Scientology. Mm-hmm. And so I sort of became less involved in being an activist and, trying to help people out and so on. And having said that, if I am contacted, and it does still happen, but rarely, I'll give advice and input and help, of course, where I can.
Yeah.
But, and then there are a few other people. At the time where I left, it was a bit of a mass, like a bit of a massacre. There were probably 30 or 40 long-term important Scientologists that were all excommunicated at the same time.
Wow.
And so, it was a very turbulent time within the church, and there was a bit of concern that it was actually going to topple. So it was like trying to cut out a cancer. So there was a whole core group of people who were very unhappy with what was going on. So they just sort of en masse try to cut out what they viewed as a cancer.
Yeah.
So a lot of those people, because we kind of shared that experience, we maintain contact, and we'll speak to each other from time to time. Occasionally we'll catch up over a dinner or a coffee. But by and large, my wife and I have spent the last 4 years sort of building a new life with new friends and new networks and all that sort of thing.
No, that's good. Good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need the support outside of that community,
yes.
because it can be very traumatizing, and
it's absolutely, and the biggest loss is really the loss of community. For so much of my life, I felt like I belonged to something. I belonged to something special. I belonged to something important, and then to find yourself in the world belonging to nothing is you feel like you've been cast adrift, and and I guess the danger there is, because I've seen this happen with a few people, is you're so desperate for that kind of connection, you sort of go from one cult to the next. It
yes.
might be, and now you just want to be involved with something else, and you become a zealot for, it could be health food or be a vegan or whatever, or CrossFit.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, but that's
yeah.
It's human nature. Yeah, that sense of community. Yeah.
Correct.
Right. So let's talk about your life now. You've touched on it a bit. What are you involved with now? I know you do a lot of public speaking and so forth. So,
it was. I mean, my main job is I'm a professional conference speaker, which was. When I was leaving the church, because I'd worked for the church for 25 years, so I was uneducated and sort of unexperienced and sort of unprepared for the world. And so I kind of looked around and found out that, there's a speaking industry, people are paid to speak. I thought, oh, that sounds good. I'll go and do that. Mm-hmm. And which was a lot harder than I thought. In my first year, I think I made 2,000 Rand and went, okay, well, this may not be a viable option. But then I started to meet people in the industry, the right sort of people who sort of acted as advisors and mentors and helped me enormously. So over the last 7 years, I've sort of built up this career as a speaker, and that's the main job. And then, funnily enough, when I was still with Scientology in 2000, Scientology ministers were Home Affairs said they could be marriage officers, so Scientologists could legally you could have a Scientology wedding if you wanted to get married.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I became a marriage officer just because we could, and then almost by accident started doing weddings for people who wanted non-religious weddings. And so when I left Scientology, I sort of carried on doing that. So that's a sort of weird other part of my life is I marry people and people who are looking for a non-traditional, they're not religious or the Jews marrying a Catholic and they want something down the middle. And there's a growing number of people who want that, who don't want a religious ceremony and all that sort of thing. And so I'm a sort of secular marriage officer. So between the speaking and that, that's what I fill my life up with from a work perspective.
Oh wow, excellent. Ryan, where can people reach you in terms of on social media? Look at the work that you're doing.
I guess the easiest is if you search Ryan Hogarth, RyanHogarth.com is my website. On Twitter is Ryan Hogarth, Instagram Ryan Hogarth, YouTube Ryan Hogarth. So if you just search the name and you can either search Ryan Hogarth Scientology or Ryan Hogarth Speaker, and depending on which side of my life you're in.
Yeah, no, definitely. Ryan, thank you very much, my friend, for joining me on the show this evening. I really appreciate it, and you and I should do a cup of coffee sometime.
Absolutely, and I'm very to have done this. I guess my only disappointment is that it's taken us so long to actually have this conversation.
Yes,
But now that we've had it, well, absolutely, let's hook up and chat and if you can keep me posted on the Apostasy movie, which is coming, I'm very interested in seeing that because again, the similarities.
No, we'll definitely keep you posted on that one. That seems to be a huge one for the ex-Jehovah's Witness community at the moment. Yeah, it's getting rave reviews. Yeah, so definitely
excellent, and I hope it shakes things up for you, for those guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. All the best, my friend, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks for joining me.
Good stuff, mate.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you. That was Ryan Hogarth, former Scientologist and spokesperson for the church, who joined me this evening. I'm glad you could join in and listen in. I will put Ryan's details in the show notes, and you can follow him on social media, see what he's up to. I'll put all my details in the show notes as well. For those of you who follow me on Twitter, RobinJackson70. Get to know my YouTube channel and so forth. And until next time, bye for now.